All right, folks, welcome to episode 16 of Trade Secrets. We are excited today to welcome our second guest on the podcast. So everybody meet Kevin Dougherty, the president of AdVenture Development. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, AdVenture Development around these parts is most notably known for the redevelopment of an area on McKnight Road called McCandless Crossing. It's about 1.2 million square feet. We'll dig into it a little bit deeper, but an incredible, probably the most noteworthy retail redevelopment in the north of Pittsburgh in the last 10, maybe even 20 years, I would say. And it was pretty much the start of AdVenture Development, if I'm correct, right? Right around 2005?
Yeah, that's pretty correct. I mean, we had a couple one-off projects in Charlotte and down in the Raleigh area, but this was the first mixed-use, large mixed-use development that we'd ever started as a AdVenture Development.
And so before that happened, give us a little bit of background on how you got from where you were to 2005 and AdVenture starts.
Well, I started my real estate career in the mortgage financing side with what was originally Cary Kramer Kraus back in the day, and they ultimately morphed into HFF, national mortgage banking firm, which recently, in the last 3 years, 4 years, got swallowed by JLL.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started in the financing side while I was in school, and from 79 to 86.
John Carroll,
John
right?
Carroll
Go
University
Blue
in
Streaks.
Cleveland, yeah, Blue Streaks, yes.
I think it's the only time Blue Streaks outnumbered people at a table
There
right
you
here
go.
today.
All right,
Sorry, Mr. Mountaineer.
there you go.
It's okay.
Yep.
In '86, I left to go in the development business with a company in Charlotte called Charter Properties. Where I went in as a retail partner and developed that platform. We were doing at that time kind of specialty retail stuff and some, Walmart centers and grocery anchored type stuff. I did that from '86 till about '90, and then in 1990 came back to Pittsburgh with my new bride and one child, and we ran a company, started a company, and ran a company for about 15 years with my partner Guy Dorenzo called Michael Joseph Development. We were based in the North Hills. And developed Lowe's home improvement centers and grocery stores, and did some Walmarts and that type of thing for till about '04, and moved south.
And it's interesting, the banking beginnings. We've talked about this actually on the podcast. I got into the business without a clue as to what real estate development or commercial leasing or sales meant. And many of the people who I asked, how do I get into this business, they said, you got two choices since your dad's not a developer.
Yeah.
Choice A is go be a mortgage broker
Yep.
and learn the business the finance way. Choice B is go work at a real estate brokerage company.
Mm-hmm.
And, what do you think you learned in the banking world that helped then transition to the development? Because it is a big change. I mean, banking is not development.
No, but the being in the mortgage banking position, you were sort of uniquely in the middle between developers and the money, and so we were taking two ends of the equation that typically don't necessarily meet real well. So you had to be kind of all things to all people to try and create the transaction, and knowing the numbers was critical to making it happen.
That's great. Yeah, Paige just finished up her CCIM 101. We're super excited about it because, like
That's
you said,
awesome.
knowing the numbers is extremely important. So we'll dig into McCandless Crossing and Eastfield down in North Carolina, and then the bourbon at some point. But we always start the talk with a conversation about current events. And the two people to my far left and far right love politics. They know that I am apolitical, and I think our crowd on this show knows this.
Let's just note, not respectively, far left and far right.
Yes, that did not mean anything by that. See, I can't even say where they're sitting without it meaning something. But the reality is, it is a current event. The election was last Tuesday. There's been a lot of national shakeup, and we don't want to get into that because we're here to talk about real estate. But from a local perspective, you're working on a 400, 500 acre redevelopment of property in North Carolina. And does that election impact your thinking at all, or are you just working on what you're working on and letting the rest kind of?
I mean, it always impacts because, developers are having to buy chicken dinners and tickets on both sides, left and right. You've got to, because you don't know who's going to be in charge. And a lot of projects can't happen without some form of participation, whether it's a TIF or a LERTA here in Pennsylvania, some kind of grant. If you've got a brownfield you're working on, or if you're working on a tear down, rebuild, but it needs significant input from PennDOT.
Right.
You need to there needs to be some help for whatever the community. You may have to study multiple intersections, so you've got to be connected politically, if for no other reason than to have doors opened for you by the bureaucracy that makes decisions, that because we don't, I'd say developers are the guys that put the border on the puzzle, but everybody is required to bring their piece. And like in the Canlis Crossing, we had the town manager back in the day asked me, he said, how many people have been involved in this in your estimation? I said, well, I stopped counting at over 1,000 because there's that many people that weigh in. Everything from the noisy neighbor to, person on planning commission, the local union guy at Duquesne Light.
Right.
You got to work with everybody, and they're all important, and they all bring a piece of the puzzle to make it happen. You don't do it in a vacuum. So,
Did you find any difference between the two states that you developed in? What was it like, the experience in Pennsylvania versus, was it easier, was it harder in North Carolina?
some pieces are easier, and like the timeline for some of the state approval process in North Carolina is a little faster. But the like the environmental type stuff, it's pretty consistent across both states. There's no substitute for connecting with people. You've got to build a relationship wherever you go. And the guy that is really difficult here, if you can build a relationship with them and respect them, it's amazing how things can happen faster. I think it's a lot of times, when people that you're dealing with are in control of some of the destiny, and if they're disrespected, how they're going. They're going to treat the project with less intensity. Whereas if you make it personal and they're involved and they become part of the team, they want to see it happen as well. I can't tell you how many times I get ideas from people that were good ideas, including even negative neighbors that say, I really didn't want this to happen, but here's a couple suggestions. And they'd end up being good ideas. Mm-hmm. But, that building of relationships with all those pieces is a key piece to making things happen.
Yeah, certainly something of the scale of those kind of projects too, because
Yeah.
they're just so.
So many moving parts.
Right.
So many things that can go wrong. So many ways to say no.
Right.
And,
And so many, one part holds up everything else.
Yes.
The toenail stops the elephant, so it's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and to Michael's point, like the project scale that you're talking about, 1.5 million square feet here, another 3 million square feet there. Like, these are not small projects. They don't happen overnight. And you're in a world coming back to, the transition from banking into development. Like, when you were banking, you had the money. You kind of were in control of what your destiny was. But then you signed up for this, where you have to pay attention to a Tuesday night election to see who's going to be impacting in your case, in North Carolina specifically now, not only the local municipality, is it all in one local municipality? Or is it cross boundaries?
Well, it's different than here, where, like Allegheny County has 132 municipalities
Right.
with 132 different zoning ordinances.
Yeah.
There, it's more centralized in that respect. It's easier. You got to look at one code.
Okay. That's
In our
countywide?
county, but then in the individual towns, and a lot of development is outside of the incorporated areas and might, just be in the county. Well, those are treated differently, and the tax structure to support them. The county, you're only paying one tax bill. But if you're in the city, you're paying a city bill and a county tax bill. But there's reasons and benefits to be in the city, the services that the city provides. And so it is a different process. But, at the end of the day, the steps that you take, whether you're doing a corner drugstore or a 3 million square foot, you're
About
still
the
going
same.
through the same steps. It's more capital, some ways a longer timeline. These are not short-term projects.
Sure.
And do you have clear favorite and clear least favorite steps in that process?
Oh, yes. And there's the risk part up front. This is not a business for people who are risk averse. It's not your business you want to be in. That said, the risk reward, it's an attention to detail. It's a pennies and nickels game, because the pennies and nickels add up. And so being clear as to where you want to get and how long does it take. We made a decision several years ago as a company. Initially, we were going to be kind of mid-Atlantic, everybody in between Pittsburgh and Raleigh, kind of North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and all the states, that you pass through in a 8-hour drive, car ride.
Sure.
Then we decided, you know what? We've got the two best markets, what I would call second-tier markets in the country, second tier in size, not quality, but second-tier markets being Pittsburgh and Raleigh. And we really didn't need to go outside of those metros. There was plenty of opportunity to support a 10, 11 person organization year after year for as long as we can do it. And we decided to make it a little easier on ourselves now I'm 62, so it's like, okay, I'm going to do it because it's fun, not because we have to.
Sure.
Do you still do the one-offs, or do you just completely focus on the larger scale?
If it's a relationship that wants us involved, yes, of course, we will do that. But I'm not out seeking, I'll go through a town like Winchester, Virginia, traveling, Warrenton, great towns that someday it'd been fun to do something. But at this point, unless something falls in our lap where there's a relationship that connects us to it.
It's too much effort to do the one
Right.
small
It,
thing.
it really is, yeah. Now,
Yeah.
if one of my younger proteges thought that I wouldn't stifle their desire, say, hey, if you think you can make something happen, you put a plan together, I'll listen. As other people along the way listened to me and decided whether they were in or out, but I'm not seeking more.
Yeah,
I
no.
like Raleigh and I love Pittsburgh. It's we're very fortunate to work both those markets. So
The protege thing is an interesting one to bring up. On your team of 11 or 12, how many would you categorize as proteges?
let's see. Right now, I'd say probably 3
Okay, so
that are folks that, and we've had multiple interns. Our interns have gone on, much as we were talking before we started, because of the experience you get being in a small shop, getting to do more things. One of my former interns turned into a full-time employee for about 3 years, and I told him, I said, somebody's gonna come after you after a few years. They see who you are, what you're doing, and you're gonna come to me sort of sheepishly like, and I'm gonna tell you, go, it's time to go. Well, this young man came.
Don't give Paige
and-
any ideas.
Well, I mean, he got twice the income, and I said, it's great to plant seeds. He went to a major retailer, and I said, the other three people that were doing the same job with him, he was 28 at the time, were 42, 40, and 39. And he had jumped his career that fast because of, we
Right.
had, it's, when you're a small organization, everybody does everything, including taking out the trash and, whatever.
Sure.
You've gotta do the hard stuff too, so he got greater exposure. So that's really an important piece, because today, that's one of those places where we could get the call for the relationship where they say, would you go do this deal? We need a developer. And that's happened a lot in my career, where people have said, hey, I need somebody to go do this town. We can't get it done.
Can you
And
go?
that's the kind of assignment you love,
Yeah.
because you're
You
gonna
love
do
to
it open
get.
book.
You don't
love to get.
necessarily love to
Yeah, you may not
do.
like the,
But you love to
depending
get the
on
phone call.
what
There's-
comes with it,
Yeah,
right?
there's a reason why they're making the phone call, is because it's extremely difficult.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I always am intrigued to know, because this is something that is a little bit hard for me in this industry. We all know credit is king. So I'm always curious when talking to developers, how do you, or how involved are you with the tenant mix in all the developments, and how do you determine, I feel like recently there's been a transition definitely in Pittsburgh of wanting to keep that local flavor, like the Pittsburgh hometown pride, with local retailers that differentiate your shopping center from the one that's all national retailers. How do you approach that decision as a developer when obviously the national retailers are the ones who add the majority of the value to the development, and still keep it unique and a place that people want to come to when they think of Pittsburgh?
It's a delicate mix. You have to have, ultimately you want to create trips and trips to your facility, and so the balance of how many of local versus how many national, and keeping it interesting, because not everybody wants to eat at the national trend restaurant. They like to have grandma's cooking at that special place. So you've got to balance it. We have in McCandless, as an example, we do have a mix of. We recently got a group signed a tenant called House of Couture, a very nice lady shop that needed to expand, needed more space, moved from Swickley out here, brought quite a following. She's next to Rue Boutique, another local lady shop that on the high end, and but you mix and balance that with Old Navy, where we have the #1 Old Navy in the region, and you try and have something for everybody, and really to our goal was we've got about 15 restaurants, and having something for everybody in the family at one point or another, or somebody that comes to the hotel and they can stay the weekend, not have to get back in their car. They can walk to these opportunities. It is a balance, and it's something we don't need 2 or 3 of the same thing. And there were the orientation of McCandless Crossing was such that we didn't put some types of tenants that we weren't just filling it up to fill space to create revenue. We were curating who went where, who's beside who, mixing and matching parking needs so that they were, you weren't creating a situation where people were
All the parking's in
all the
one
parking's
place.
in one
Right.
spot, and people get frustrated.
And they don't show up again.
Yeah, exactly. So
And what percentage would you say of those decisions are made prior to the building even be like the shell even being completed, like what the tenant mix needs to be as far as how many
that's early
retail
on.
or big box, you know.
Yeah, that's early on with our brokers. The brokers play an unbelievable important position because they control the deal flow. Brokers are key to making it happen. When we set out to do McCandless Crossing, we sat down. Echo was our retail broker at the time, and we went to every brokerage house though in Pittsburgh. And our goal was to make sure that each of those brokers houses were able to contribute and to earn something off of our development and to contribute something. So we went after it with that purpose. So, and I'm proud to say that every brokerage house has contributed to McCandless Crossing multiple times.
Yeah.
And on an ongoing, but every one of those brokers have kept in touch with me, will call me, bounce off ideas. Is there something coming due in the near future? That kind of thing. So brokers are huge to making it happen.
It is incredible. I mean, I think Convive, that was their first store, right, at McCandless?
Yeah.
And now they're on.
He's got 4, and I think
5?
he's working on his 5th store.
Yeah. So that's got to feel good. Like on the flip side of it, like Paige in the early years has witnessed a couple startup retailers who the developers are just like not going to take the bait with. But then you hear those stories and you're like, well.
When he was found out of Florida.
Really?
Echo found him in Florida. His wife, I believe it was his wife, was from Hampton Township.
Okay.
So had a first child. It was time to move back. Sold their coffee store in somewhere in Florida. I think it was might have been Orlando. And now it's a great story of growth. He's done a great job. Ryland is they're just solid folks, and I think they're 5 or 6 kids later. I guess they're going to have a store for each kid one of these days. But they're really good operators, and they do a nice job. But again, I didn't find them. The brokers found them.
But you
and brought them back to Pittsburgh.
You agreed to take the chance.
Yes.
I mean, in theory,
Yes.
you had no credit.
Mm-hmm.
And whether Starbucks was or wasn't knocking on the door, there's like the credit choice. Like.
Yep. And I will tell you, the one thing that we looked at with him was that there was some stability there. There was history. He wrote a business plan. I don't mind, I'm a startup. So I really have a passion for people that are willing to have that risk gene to try something. So we've taken several of those players out there and in North Carolina that, we're right now in our tech development down there. We've got a startup food hall. We've got Shield Republic, an online business that came to our space, and a North Carolina wholesale flooring company that essentially we were the first location for all of them. And if we don't start it, nobody else will. So
When you start off a project, I'm going back to its initial gestation. Let's just say it's a field.
yeah.
Okay, what's the driver there? What are you looking at? Because that's a decision that you're going to see come to fruition, not even come to fruition, start to come to fruition 10 years from now.
And I want to layer in because it was on my to-do today. You're in the middle of McCandless Crossing, and there's a field in North Carolina. Like, there's a lot going on in McCandless. There's a lot of money at risk. But at some point, you're like, man, I'm going to shift some of my energy to a field.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that the difference, or what we learned in McCandless, as my wife said, it was the warm-up act
Yeah.
to get to Eastfield, only in terms of like size, because
Size.
it's so much larger. It's 3 McCandlesses. But what made that happen, the vision from it came what we learned in McCandless, and that collaborative effort of the municipality, neighbors, LaRoche, UPMC, all the players that abutted us that we spent time talking, getting to know, who helped pour into curating what we ended up with. We took that, and that was right at the height of mixed uses really starting, was 08, 09, right in the middle of the recession. And Pittsburgh was flourishing through that recession. I told people in Raleigh, Pittsburgh opted out. It wasn't participating because the energy companies, you had over 80 energy companies relocate here
Right.
from '08 to 13. And, even though some other industries were getting hit in Pittsburgh,
That was
energy
the-
was
the-
coming
the
up.
natural gas
So
boom.
it never, Pittsburgh didn't miss a beat.
Right.
Steady as she goes. And I thought, our project, we built right through it, and it was miraculous, really. And I think partly because we have such a solid, diverse economy in Pittsburgh. You've got education, you've got medical, you've got banks, and now we had energy and high technology. I
But
mean,
you'd say the same thing about Raleigh.
and I do, say,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but it didn't in '08 and '09. It's really added several, FNB and PNC, both since that recession have come to Raleigh. So it's solidified a couple of the other sectors where I'd say they maybe were a little weaker. The growth, we moved to Johnston County, which I would liken to either, Butler or Washington County as it is
Okay.
to Allegheny. Johnston County is to Wake County, which is Raleigh proper. There were 100,000 people in the county when I got there. Today, there's over 235, and we'll be the 5th largest county in North Carolina, larger than Durham in 2030 or shortly thereafter, if the pace continues.
Where did you get that crystal ball? Like, how did you? Were there indicators that, or was it just kind of like?
Well, the first piece of the puzzle that I looked at, I was crossing I-95 at exit 97, and that had 6 lanes crossing over 95. And I was driving up and down 95 anyway. I'm like, there's no other 6-lane bridges. There's 2-lane and 4-lane bridges. I kept thinking somebody had something in mind because that thing was built in 2000 or built in 1965.
The 6-lane bridge.
The 6-lane bridge.
Oh, man.
And I'm thinking they were planning something big here. And that's what got my attention. And driving back and forth across it, because I bought 7 acres. Then I bought another 10. Then I got Echo involved. They were partnering for a little while. We got it up to about 90. Then we got it, they needed to, one of the partners passed away, and they kind of were shifting gears, so we bought them out, took it up to about 180, and then Trump picked up Obama's Opportunity Zone initiative and finished it and announced it in whatever it was, maybe July of, no, it was November of 17. They put it into action with a plan in July of 18. We doubled down and started, because we made an
So you
application.
bought in an opportunity zone.
We didn't know it at the time, but we made an application. There were 19 sites that applied for OZ status in the county. We were one of 4 selected. So when we were selected, we went ahead and said, we need more than 180 acres. We just bought everything we could, and that's how we got to where we are today.
And how many, what's the assembly?
It's about, we own 411 in fee and about another 65 acres that we have in contract that we haven't closed on, so that are part of it, like an addition to our business park piece. So, we felt like that Opportunity Zone initiative was really, I mean, it was something, it was meant to stimulate development.
Sure.
So, we looked at it and said, okay, we're in these for the long haul anyway. To get your maximum benefit out of an Opportunity Zone, you need to stay in at least 10 years
At least
in a
10
day.
years.
And
you were
that
already in.
fit our
Right.
MO. We're long haul. We're not flippers.
Sure.
We've owned McCandless. We started it in, I started McCandless in my head in '92. That's the first, I was representing Lowe's, got the site approved. I'm not a very good broker at the time, because it took till '05 till we actually bought the first piece. But it was an approved deal in '92.
Oh,
We
my
couldn't
gosh.
we could not get it. We couldn't get land under agreement. We couldn't get the town of McCandless to agree. It wasn't really until we bought the first piece, we sat down with the town of McCandless and reimagined the whole game plan. And then we bought North Allegheny, we bought the West Campus of La Roche, a couple of smaller parcels. Vic Mashuda, who was a major earth-moving company here, we bought a piece from him. 6 tracts that came up with 135 acres. And then kind of took that, and we bought 24 tracts in North Carolina to come up with 475 acres.
But of all those areas, that you will outsource the residential component?
Yes.
You'll outsource the industrial component, or do you keep that in-house?
We, in Eastfield, I tried to outsource it. I couldn't get anybody to, build that first spec building. So we built the first one, 135,000 square foot, 36-foot clear. We researched what was, critical to the industrial. We did the first one, brought a good leasing team on in North Carolina, and they got us a tenant, 20-year lease, about 3/4 of the way through construction.
Wow.
Thank goodness. I was on my knees praying because we're building, Dollar Bank came down from Pittsburgh, took a risk with us on building this spec building.
You got a guy to build spec in an unproven market? See,
Yes.
now that's the blending of the lending aspect and mixing it with
Yes,
the development
absolutely.
aspect.
We could not
because-
do anything close to what without our debt and our equity investors.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to further answer your question, the other partners in McCandless, we had 5 other developers join us in McCandless Crossing for the stuff that we didn't do or didn't have experience at.
Sure.
Which
Barry
allowed you to
yeah,
get rid of the risk.
the Pittsburgh developers, Marty Gillespie, at the time, I'm trying to remember what he sold it to NVR, and he's now Laurel Capital, or Laurel Communities. 2 groups that did the 2 different senior livings. Wide Waters, Joe Scuderi's company team did a great job on the first hotel. Those were critical to us to make those other pieces happen at the same time.
Yeah, and those are really kind of almost like operating entities. That the guys that do senior living, they do senior living.
Yep.
The guys that do hotels, they do hotels. But they're parts and pieces, and it's so integral to everything else that you're doing in the mixed use.
You're right. You're right. I mean, it was
Space.
important to the cross fertilization, those uses. And I will tell you, the only thing we did for them to make their job easier, I handled all their entitlements with the town of
Yeah.
McCandless. So they didn't have to deal, the part that the developer doesn't usually like is the public meetings and, that part. So we handled that for them and made it so they could come in and do what they were best at, build the buildings.
So the pacing of it, as you deliver, because as you offload that to them, you want them to take it and run with it.
Yes.
So now that piece is going to
Yep.
deliver where the rest of them
Yep.
go. Have you had any issues with that, or?
You kind of got to go with what the market will give you. So sometimes you have to cancel vacations and make hay while the sun's shining. I mean, it's just the way it is. But if you've got people that are ready to go, you got to go.
Mm-hmm.
You stop what you're doing and you work on the deals that are ready to go. And I never thought we'd have 2 senior livings in the middle of but we have 2 tiers of offerings, and we've got a lot of seniors in the. We were joking that I was building a place that somebody's going to house me, and so. You want to make sure that the care and the opportunity that you put together is something that I'd want my folks in, or that I would want to be in, or want my children to,
Well,
use.
as you were building it up there, was that something that you aimed at, that we need to have X amount of senior living in here as part of our residential component?
I really thought it was going to be office initially, but we also had McCandless Corporate Center already across the street. So we didn't want to compete with those folks, so we met with them several times and their brokers and realized that that's not our best foot forward. They're already meeting that void, that need.
Sure.
And they put a lot of people in those restaurants every day at lunch. And so we went, what is missing? And we tried, and you find out what's missing by asking people, what do we not have? What would you like to see? What would you like to see that's different, could be different? and what's working, what's not working. Those kinds of questions, you get a lot of ideas. And my simple method, I write it down, and when I start writing it down and it's down there 3 or 4 times, that's my clue. Pay attention.
That's interesting. I was going to ask, is the void analysis a gut or a science?
We do both. I mean, people that you respect and ask, I try and cross generation, because what's important to me isn't necessarily going to be the same thing you or my kids are looking for. So, not that you make decision by consortium, but you've got to respect everybody's opinion, and you've got to look at how everybody looks at things differently, because it makes a huge difference.
Oh, mixed use has to include mixed age.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have a choice about that.
Yep.
It's,
I mean, safety, making sure that, you cross multiple generations. Nothing gives me a greater thrill than when I go into BJ's and they're having a birthday party and you see 4 generations there all enjoying it together. That's really, that's when I get excited. That's what we wanted to create. Someplace, kind of be that third place after home, after work or church.
Sure.
I got to make sure. Because we have a church.
You have
we
a
have we have
church.
churches all around us, and we had to spend time. We have the Greek church that butts up against us. We had La Roche, which is a Catholic university. We've got everybody there that we gotta be respectful of, and we had some things that we had to talk through. How can we help each other? You don't always agree on everything.
Right.
But there were a couple tenants that would have liked to have been in the development that I remember my wife saying, "Not on my watch. It's not going to happen." And those kinds of things. She said that doesn't fit the vision. That doesn't fit what we were trying to create. And the town agreed. And so we just didn't pursue those tenants. And it's worked out okay.
So Eastfield, you started that project. Well, land assemblage started in.
Well, I bought the first piece in '07,
Okay.
and then there were fits and stops along the way. That recession kind of hit us down there a little harder, but the success of McCandless really encouraged me that we could do the mixed use, because started to look at the data, really started to pay attention to the data about 2009, 2010, and I realized, when we moved there, my kids would say, "Hey, there's no Target, there's no Panera, all the places that we like to go up here, we didn't have," so that was easy. I sat down with one of the retail consultants, Peter Gurney, and Peter did all the work for like General Growth and Cabela's and all
Okay.
these guys. And he sat down, we made a list. We had 800,000 square feet without duplicating or competing with anything that was already there. So we said, okay, well, let's plan 500. There'll still be something left for the next project,
Sure.
And that's kind of how it got started on the retail side. And then we started adding all these other components. We got 200,000 feet of medical plan, 3 hotels, senior living, multifamily, single family. And then I had a guy that I hired out of Chicago 8 years ago now, who came from the logistics industry. He came down and he said, "You need a business park." I'm like, I knew it wouldn't be an office market, because we were out a little further. And he made his case, because we already had I-95, we had I-40, and we had Highway 70, soon to become I-42, all running right through the middle of us. And we also had the north, south, east, west, one of 5 places in the U.S. where the railroad crosses. So, and the largest inland port is right across the street from us, called Bailey Feed Mill. But they were everything but a feed mill, more than a feed mill. They huge freight, all the Army stuff from Fort
Okay.
Bragg and Air Force Base and biopharmaceuticals, all these things, rail they could get to 5 ports, Norfolk all the way down to Savannah, Charleston, Moorhead, Wilmington. All those were accessible by rail, which I had never even considered. It was totally foreign to me. But this one guy brings in a knowledge that I didn't have, and boom, he contributes. Now we got a 160 acre business park,
Which is
because
incredible.
He thought
What's
about
the
it.
yield in that gonna be? How many million square feet?
About 1.5 million right now, and and it's a hot commodity right now.
Right.
Industrial is working
Yeah,
strong.
what is the size, what's the typical size of a building that you're
Well,
building?
we
there?
built 135,000 square foot spec, and we did that after looking at the number of requests for information to our Johnston County Economic Development Office. And then we just they were averaging 70 to 80 requests a year that couldn't be fulfilled because there was no spec space available in the county. Everything that was there was full. So we just took the average and we came out, it was like about 110. But the site we chose, we could maximize the utility of the site by getting to 135. So we did. Fortunately found a tenant.
I love that you're going to the economic development departments and like having conversations and
Absolutely.
Thinking
Very
critically,
critical
right.
to our plan. Them, the Visitor Bureau, Economic Development, County Manager, Town Mayor, all of those people were critical to creating a quality of life, all these pieces of the puzzle again.
It goes back to the buy-in that you needed for mixed-use mass scale like
Well,
that.
what I did, I brought 2 different groups, flew up here to see McCandless Crossing so that they could help us imagine what we would create in Eastfield. Because we didn't sit there and say, this is what we need to do. We said, here's the land. What would you like to see? And come up here to Pittsburgh. Let us show you what we did up there, what this group, and then we introduced them to the Allegheny County
To the
guys and
same.
introduced them to the town of McCandless officials and introduced them to, our consultants up here and said, here's what we got down here. And literally, some of the people in Pittsburgh have invested, contributed, and literally not just financial, but made, mental contributions to what we should be doing down there and have come down. And that play back and forth, because there's a real symbiotic relationship between what Raleigh is and what Pittsburgh is in terms of the economies. And I would say the quality of people. KDKA used to have the thing, Pittsburgh's someplace special, and it is. Yeah, it's an amazing place. So our goal, every season when I put my Steeler flag on my Yukon, I get hit beep beep at the light. What parish are you from? Where are you at in Pittsburgh? And first thing that went up in our food hall in the tavern, the Longleaf Tavern, was the my number 39 football helmet, because Fast Willie Parker lives about 30 miles
Oh, really?
from our project, and of course Myron Cope's terrible towel is hanging in the center spot right above the tavern. So
yeah. So, man, there's 2 places I want to go, but you just talked about relationships and investors. So talk to us about, this isn't all just your money, right? Like you
No.
you need banks, but you also need other investors on lots of different levels. So talk to us about what syndication means to you and making things like this happen.
Well, in our business card, our V in AdVenture is capitalized for a reason, because everything we do is a venture, a joint venture of maybe a landowner,
I
a
didn't know that.
tenant,
That's awesome.
a capital source. We've raised money friends and family style, and getting people to jump on the trip with you and take a risk is not easy. So my simple example for any investor, I would say, it's got to be the top of your capital stack. And frankly, I don't want people investing with us that we don't enjoy, that I can't have dinner or lunch with, and they've got to be of the ilk. I said, this is a criteria, but I got to be able to leave you alone with my wife for an hour. Those 3 criteria really were kind of. I married way beyond my means, and And
Ditto.
so that was a
Ditto.
key thing. I mean, you know the type of people I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So it can't be your college tuition for your kid. I'm not going to take it. It's
Right.
got to be your highest risk money,
Right.
because real estate is not a liquid investment.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
It's a very unique way of explaining it. First time I've ever heard that.
she probably would be upset. But it's the truth. I mean, you just want life's short. All our projects, when we do a project, I think about, I'm going to have to answer someday, good Lord, did this project glorify God? Did I do something of value here? Did we create, we take other people's money, we better use it wisely. And so Hope and I, we don't ask anybody for money until we typically will do, depending on the size of the project, 10 to 15 to 20%. We'll invest first and then we'll ask. But we want to make sure we've got skin in the game. It's not, we don't take that responsibility lightly. So.
And that's the best answer I've heard to that question. We just successfully raised capital for our third investment, and it's an interesting experience for sure.
It's hard.
It's
very
hard. Sometimes too easy
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people don't ask enough questions, and you're like, man, wild. But that I've talked to a lot of people about the experience of raising money, and that's by far the top response I've got, and it leads directly into where I was going to go with the next one. So you break ground at some point prior to 2020, COVID hits. You're in the middle of a 400-acre development. You clearly have a lot of capital at risk. You have a lot of bank risk. Then the world recovers, development progresses. You land some really good tenants down there. Do some leases, and now we're in a year of disruption like I haven't seen. Coupled with interest rates have grown by 200% since you started the project. Like, I don't know, so many questions. Like, why do you do this to yourself? But like, how do you have the forethought to be able to think, well, when I'm in year 4 of construction, my interest payments are going to double. Like, or do you not? And you just,
Or how do you
Or
I mean,
reassess.
there's some things that I just remember, people way smarter than me imparting wisdom all along the way. I mean, I've had huge amount of people that mentored me, that helped, and I'd say don't sweat the small stuff. It's a simple one, but it's still keep standing no matter what. That's critical. And do what you say you're going to do. Deliver the bad news when it's there. Just be honest. You got to tell the truth. And those kinds of things have served us well. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, COVID, when we literally redid and amended every single lease that we had at McCandless Crossing. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I got to talk to this tenant because I know they're gonna be a problem. They never missed a payment, and the ones who you thought would be fine, boy, that was a discussion.
Sure.
So it's never quite exactly how you expect it, but I think flexibility's really important, and just stay the course of the mission though, and we've surrounded ourselves with great lenders, great consultants, just good people. And we've had good people, investors that we can go to for advice and help. And I mean, I've still got plenty of people. I learned from my kids now. I mean, truly, we had to try and figure out, do we need electric vehicle charging stations in every one of our properties? I remember July of 19, my kids were accusing me of being technologically illiterate. And so I got the Uber app, I got the Starbucks app, and I bought a $39,900, the cheapest Tesla you could get, because I didn't know anybody that had one. I had one guy in my Vistage group that had one, and he said, yeah, go get it. And I didn't even get the floor mats. You know, because I was trying, I'm like, if this is a dud, I don't want to.
I don't want to.
You know, well, best car, you know, ever owned, all that. I mean, can't say enough about that car. Still driving it 40,000 miles later. Just use it as my local, but that's all coming. And there's a boatload of companies in Pittsburgh
Yeah.
and Raleigh are both in the middle of the autonomous vehicle
Boom,
and the
yeah.
electric vehicle industries, and which is going to serve these cities, both these communities, really well for the next 50 years. So.
All right. Well, before we get to our last question with Kevin, what do you guys think about the bourbon? This was the birthday present, so thank
It
you.
was, yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Kevin's happy birthday bourbon.
Calumet Farms small batch, and it's a mixture of a 15-year-old as well as an 8-year-old bourbon.
I love it. Thank you guys. This is a
Yeah.
fantastic birthday present. So we're gonna haven't even discussed this with the team, but since we now have a name for our podcast, which is Trade Secrets, and it's really not about our trade secrets. It's just about the play on TRA and CRE. But when you look back at everything AdVenture's doing, what that you're willing to share, anyways, would you describe as the trade secrets for your success?
I think perseverance. We just, you know, when we and it's not. I think it's a collaborative process in our firm. You know, everybody has an opportunity to contribute and weigh in and make it happen because it, you know, it's somebody had to start it. But yeah, I think those are key elements of how we've been successful. We've been willing to get out of the way when it's time to get out of the way, put our ego aside and let somebody that's smarter and better, if it adds value to the project, adds value to our investors' investment. And that's important. It's important that we do work. My dad used to say, when you work on what you want, with who you want, when you want, it's not work. And
Yep.
he died at 88 with 4 jobs. And, you know, he lived it. So that's always stuck with me that, you know, biblically, there's nothing about retirement in the word. So I kind of go, you know what? I'm here for a reason. As long as I'm here, I'm supposed to be doing something. And I'm not that good at any other stuff. So I'm not a very good golfer. My wife will tell you I'm not, you know, this is something I think I've grown to understand. I will tell you, I think about one thing I do like to do, and I currently do this a lot still with other young people, mentoring, because I was mentored. And I joke, but Bob Carey, his wife, Bob unfortunately passed, he was an icon in the real estate industry here, along with John Kramer and Dick Krause, you know, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And Bob, if those guys had been shoe salesmen, I'd be a shoe salesman today because they took an interest in me and encouraged me and directed me and, you know, kept me on the right path. That's how I learned it. You know, somebody, you know, watching over and making sure that, you know, your motivations were good ones. You know, money can come from a whole slew of things.
Right.
That's not a good motivation. Yeah, McCandless. One thing I'm very proud of there. Those are 2,200 jobs that are now there that weren't there.
Right.
And in Eastfield, our economic development, they hired Sanford Holhauser, which is like a think tank kind of organization
Okay.
that they did an economic impact based on our plan, and we will end up somewhere between 3,500 and 5,500 jobs. That's a lot of impact.
That's a lot of impact.
And, you know, we get excited when a company says they're moving here and they're going to bring 700 jobs. 5,500, that moves the
That
needle.
moves the needle.
So that's why we're doing it. And, you know, we want to, at the end of the day, I want to have, you know, done my best.
That's
and with
awesome.
our team. So,
Well, cheers to that, to
Yeah.
perseverance, collaboration, and
Yeah.
mentorship.
And thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
hey,
thank you
thank you
so
for
much.
having me. This
was
was great.
This
I
was
appreciate
This
it.
was
Fantastic.
wonderful.
All right, folks, episode 16 is in the books, and thank you so much for coming, Kevin.
You bet.
Really appreciate it.
I do too. Thank you.
All right, take care.
You bet.